My newsletter welcome email has a question on the bottom, and it asks people, what is your biggest struggle when it comes to branding? Because it's really interesting sometimes to get the replies and find out what people are really struggling with so that I can create better content to help people with the things they're struggling with most. Recently, I got a reply to this email and someone said that the thing that was struggling with most was charging enough. They felt like they were creating great work, but they were struggling with being able to price it for what it was really worth. So today I wanted to talk about how you can use your branding to be able to charge more, make more money, and feel really confident about the prices you're putting on your products and services. Now, the thing that often holds people back from charging what they want in their products and services is imposter syndrome, feeling like they're not good enough. And the quickest way to up-level that and change that through your branding is by repositioning. You want to create a brand that looks and feels like the brand that will be charging those prices. If your branding doesn't align with your pricing, people are going to feel like they're being cheated or that something isn't quite right, something doesn't align in some way. So if your brand looks really cheap, but then your prices are really high, people are going to feel like it's some sort of scam. Whereas if your branding felt really high-end and very luxury, but your new prices are very cheap, then they'll probably be thinking that they're not that great, and then they won't buy anyway, even though it's cheap, because they think, well, it probably isn't that good. So making sure that your brand positioning aligns with your product pricing is so important. Your brand's visual identity is going to create an impression about your brand's positioning in the marketplace. When people first come across your branding, they're instantly going to get an impression about its positioning, whether this is a really high-end luxury brand that's going to be very expensive, whether this is more sort of high street level where maybe it's a little bit more expensive, but it's still fairly affordable, or is it this really cheap brand that is just going to be producing really cheap stuff, but it's super affordable, and if that's the level that you're at, then you can still get something fairly good at a cheap price. So if you've been struggling with your pricing, one of the first things you need to look at is, does your brand give the impression that it's the kind of brand that would be charging the prices you want to charge? And if it isn't, you need to start looking at why that is. What it is about your branding that's pulling down your positioning in some way. One way you can do this is by researching your competitors. Look at other people that are doing similar things, have similar offers. One way of doing this is researching your competitors, looking at people that are selling similar things and looking at the style of their branding and what they're charging, and then thinking about how you want to position your own brand compared to them. Where do you want to sit on the scale? Now, there's a lot more to positioning than just simply pricing, but because we're looking at your pricing for this particular case, we'll just look at this in terms of your slider. So looking at who's charging the most, who's charging the least, and then where do you want to sit in your pricing compared to those people? And then look at their visual branding. How are they establishing that positioning? What are they using that's giving that impression that they are that kind of brand that would charge those kind of prices? It's also important to keep in mind who you actually want to attract and get to know that audience to make sure your positioning actually attracts the right kind of people. So thinking about who would actually be paying those kind of prices you want to charge, and then getting to know them, getting to know what appeals to them, what are they actually looking for, what do they find impressive, what is the kind of brand that they're going to feel attracted to versus the kind of brand that they're going to feel turned off by. By getting to know them and getting clear on that, you can make sure that your branding is actually going to appeal to that person, so then when they come across it for the first time, they're instantly going to think, this is a brand I might be interested in, rather than just, oh, that looks too cheap for me, or oh, that looks too expensive for me, but they feel like this looks like a brand that could be a good fit for me. Just think about when you walk into a store like Walmart or Kmart versus when you walk into a store like Chanel. There's going to be a completely different feeling, and that's what you want to create with your branding. You're going to set the tone so people instantly get an impression about the kind of pricing they might see from your brand. When you set that expectation, then people aren't going to get a shock when they see the pricing, because they already feel like they've got a general idea of what to expect. And so if they've got to the point that they're actually checking out your products or services, then they already are aware that that's the kind of pricing that they're probably going to see. And so you're not just suddenly going to lose them as soon as they see the price. They're more going to be looking at other details. You know, is this the right fit? Is this what I actually was looking for? Rather than, or I don't know about the price. So what can you do to improve your positioning? Now, one of the biggest things I think with positioning is fonts. Fonts can create a real impression about positioning. So something that's very luxury and high-end, you're going to want to use more traditional, simple and classic fonts. Whereas something more cheap and cheerful, you're going to use more playful, fun and rounded type font. Then there's color. Color is very emotionally powerful and it creates certain feelings and certain memories and connections with things. So when we see a color, we instantly sort of get an impression about what this is going to be, and it evokes different feelings and emotions in us. And so picking the right colors can really make a big difference. Now, a more luxury brand is going to have more dark, muted tones, whereas a cheaper brand is going to have really bright colors. Now, this doesn't mean that there can't be some level of in-betweenness there, where you could sometimes have some brights in a luxury brand or some more muted tones in a cheaper brand, but certain colors are going to give certain impressions. It's not necessarily about just the color itself, but the saturation and tone and things like that. So for example, if you're trying to pick something for your fonts, well, a black is going to look very luxury high-end, and even a dark rich grey, whereas a really light grey is going to look cheaper. So you really got to think about where you want their colour to fit. Are you going to pick really rich, strong tones, really bright, colourful tones, really soft, muted tones? Whatever tones you're picking, it's going to create an impression. And then another big factor is your photography. So your photography is also really going to set a big tone about the positioning of your brand. By having photos that look really high-end and beautifully curated, styled, and look like they're taken, by a professional photographer, and really beautiful and elegant and thought through, they're going to look much more high-end. Whereas you have something that looks very basic, like you just took it on your phone, or something that looks very obviously like a stock photo, that's obviously going to cheapen your brand. So using the right kind of photography that really sets the tone is going to make a huge difference. Photography is something that you struggle with. This might be one area that you might want to hire out if you really want to up level your brand. If you're still unsure, something that you can do is find some people that would be your ideal audience and test it in front of them. Ask them, how do they feel about your brand? What kind of impression do they get from it? What's the expectation they feel is being set when they come across your branding? Do they think this is a brand that's going to be charging the high prices, mid-range prices, low prices? What impression are they getting? And by getting that feedback from those people, you're going to be able to see how you might be able to adjust things. You can even ask them, what was it that made you think that? Was it the color? Was it the font? Was it the photos? Was it the logo? Was it something else? And by getting that feedback, you can slowly make those adjustments, up level your brand by changing that positioning, setting the tone, and then people are going to be willing to pay the prices that you want to charge. So I hope you found this helpful and it really got you thinking about your own brand positioning. And if you'd like to learn more about branding, graphic design and creativity, then be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.